This is The Good Ride, James Beastie,
Davey Boy here.
and we're primarily talking about the Snommilier.
That's one of my favorite play on words I've ever seen in the snow industry.
And next to it is the Morning Glory and the Aloha Vibes. They're all part of the Future Shapes group, but they're so different, we won't be referencing them that much. I rode this in pretty good powder, deep like knee high with Union Atlas and Ride Fuse. Then I got it on some really good groomers just to see what this camber profile could do there too. And that was pretty fun as well.
I rode this with my burnt ion boots and Union Force bindings. I got it out in an alright powder day. It was about like a foot of snow, pretty dry and light, but underneath was a little bit of a crusty layer.
When it comes to sizing, I was really surprised. Yeah, the Morning Glory might have been a better fit for my size 9 boots, 185 pounds and 5'10" frame. The Aloha Vibes felt really wide, but that's what it's supposed to do. I thought this would be a little difficult for me to handle, but I could manage this pretty well with my specs, and I thought it worked for me.
I'm 6'4", 235, and 166 was a perfect size for my size 12 boots. Edge to edge, easy to engage, and overall the board didn't feel too big or too small. It was just kind of right down the middle, perfect size. I do think that there's a little bit more of a different personality that it gets though when you go up from 50 pounds from BC to me, because he thought it was a little more straight liney and gunny, and I found it to be a little bit more playful and kind of swivelly in powder.
Your boots were way more on the edge.
Yeah.
And mine weren't. When it comes to shape, this is very tapered, very directional, huge swallowtail, but somehow it doesn't feel that tapered, that directional. It feels more centered. I set this all the way back in powder and I still felt this between my feet kind of centered feel, but you do feel that big old long nose and you know, all that float and easiness, but the way it turned felt more centered, and that was really cool and really different. Then you throw in that camber profile, which is camber from the tail to a little bit of early rise before the nose. It's a pretty technical board. It's more for the snowboarder that's on the advanced to expert side of things. Even in powder, there can be some moments where, especially with this length, if you're like my size, it can be a little bit on the technical catchy side. But maybe a strong intermediate could handle this.
I definitely agree. They're all a lot more front foot turny than you would expect, especially these two with the shape of them. And I think if you're somebody that isn't as back foot of a weighted rider, but you want a swallowtail, this is a pretty good option.
This flex has some bend to it. And Amplid boards are not the stiffest boards out there. The nose is kind of softer. The center's medium stiff, almost bordering on medium. Then if you're playing with this big old swallowtail, it's pretty stiff, but not super stiff. More like medium stiff to medium, where the nose is almost medium to medium soft. And overall, it's just got a nice snap. They have this rubbery type flex that you don't think is gonna snap back, and it's pretty damp for its flex, but then it pops on you and it gives back once you flex into it. And it was easy for me to access this pop. It was easy for me to butter off the tail. It was easy for me to butter off the nose if I could lean into it enough, because the nose is soft enough to butter, but it's not really that kind of board. What I like though is the pop and the give, and it did a pretty good job popping off little things that my old broken body could.
Yeah, it was unique because normally boards with real springy tails are like springy out of the turn too. But this one wasn't very springy out of the turn, but it definitely had good pop, and it had a good landing gear for the two fins on the tail too. A lot of the times when you get that thin and long on each side, they can be a little washy, but I found that they stayed firm together in the landing, and overall, the little airs that I was hitting, it performed a lot better than I expected.
So speaking of how this Flex personality handled uneven terrain, I would say it did a pretty good job, but I didn't get a lot of it. This just felt like a good conditions board for me, and I didn't really want to stress test it and all that other stuff. But what's interesting is it doesn't have on their spec sheet, the anti-phase dampening, that really cool, amazing proprietary tech that Amplid has that's unique to almost any other board I've tried, really dampens up the ride. But these felt pretty damp, pretty good. And speed, I would say this is fast for me. For Davey, not as much, because we're looking at 50 pounds difference.
Yeah.
But for me, this was a straight liner. I could point this, and I got this out on groomers, and it just kept building on each turn and really driving out of each one and going faster. I wouldn't say the base glide was amazing, but it's definitely above average. When well waxed, it's pretty good, but I've ridden a lot of faster bases, but it's still not a deal breaker for most people unless you're just the ultimate bass snob.
It was all right. It wasn't bad, you know, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything special in terms of speed.
Yeah, and it just shows how specs can really change the personality of a board. When it comes to edge hold, I felt like this had good grip. When it comes to turn initiation, I didn't feel this was that fast edge to edge. I felt like the Aloha Vibes was hands down the slowest. The Morning
Same.
Glory initiated a turn much faster for me, but you can see its shape. It just seems like it responds easier to somebody with a size 9 boot, just a little narrower underfoot, it seems like, or felt like to me. This one initiated a turn well enough, especially in some tree lines I had. It did a good job, but not amazing, but just kind of medium turn initiation.
Well, my size 12 boots, it wasn't fast edge to edge, but it also wasn't so slow that it was noticeable. It was just kind of right in the middle.
I rode this 18 front and +3 back. It just really turned well that way. I also rode it in powder, 18 front and -3 back. You can front foot weight this, you can center weight it, you can back foot weight it. If you're coming from a twin and you want to try something super directional, this will be a really easy transition into it, where a lot of super tapered, super directional swallowtail boards like this require like an ultra posy stance.
Exactly.
Or a really back foot weighted turn. Once you initiate the turn and you're going through it, you have to really lean into your back foot. These don't. I just felt like I could ride these any damn way I'd like, and that's pretty cool. It just was a fun board to turn. There was lots of spring out of the turn, but the turning experience is definitely a straight line oriented board. It's not really as much of an across the groomer carver. It's definitely down the line, narrow turns, long, fast, almost straight line kind of turns. That's where this board shined. But when I got it on a circle carve, I was surprised that I could almost get it to circle carve in a very narrow patch of groomer. That was kind of a surprise. So the 9.5 meter or something like that side cut radius might not be all of the story. There might be more to this board in how it initiates and completes a turn. So who knows, but the turning experience was very fun and it has good pop out of a turn. I wouldn't just ride this in powder. I'd go out and mock some groomers every now and then with this for sure.
Yeah, I didn't get this on groomer, so I can't put in my 2 cents here too much.
When it comes to powder, this thing floats for days, has all kinds of float, the deepest of deep. What I loved about this is when I saw the description, I was like, well, great, you know, it's made for steep, wide open faces and to just mock, which we have none of at Mount Bachelor. So
maybe one off the summit.
yeah, but just for a little bit, you know, it's like nothing like the terrain they have where they tested Amplid.
Yeah.
But in low angle powder, this thing jammed. We don't have tight trees, so I wouldn't want this in tight trees. The trees that we had, this was moving through it. I never had an awkward moment. I thought this was a very fun low angle powder board, especially for those who like to try to keep their speed. And when you hit an open field, really give it all you got. This is a great floater and there is lots of setback on board. A negative 10.875 inch setback on board versus the very mellow setback on side cut. And that's at a 22 inch stance width set all the way back. You can really feel this directional float in the swallowtail, big ass nose, all that taper, a little bit of early rise before the nose. This is a floater. This is for the deepest of deep days. I wouldn't call this a pure powder board though, because it rips groomers.
Yeah, I really like this board and powder. This thing floated really well, like Beastie said. It killed the low angle powder, definitely nose up, wasn't sinking at all. Would love to get this out in some big, steep, wide open bowls.
Yeah, I think in the deep, this was my favorite. I think the Aloha Vibes would be second, but it really feels wide. The Morning Glory, I think, would be the great all-day powder ride. If you're searching for little POW stashes at the end of the day and you're going through a lot of uneven terrain and you need to turn and manage uneven snow more, this would be a little better. But all three of them have great float. This is just, you know, obviously by length, and Swallowtail has the most float.
Yeah.
And overall, I had a really good time. It was fast, fun, floaty, really good at high-speed groomer carves. It could be a really fun board in the quiver if how we described all this calls to you.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a swallowtail, you're a more centered stance rider coming off of a twin, you don't want something that feels very directional, this is a really good option.